ActionSA is tonight blaming the DA for the decision to withdraw a motion of no confidence against Johannesburg Mayor Kabelo Gwamanda. It's accused the party of putting its own political interests ahead of the city's stability by refusing to work with the Patriotic Alliance in these efforts to unseat the Johannesburg Mayor. For more on this, let's speak to ActionSA's national chairperson, Michael Beaumont, who's joining us in studio. So where did the wheels come off, Michael, between yourselves and the DA in this process?
Well, it's hard to say, but certainly at the sidelines of the multi-party charter, a number of parties made it clear that we cannot build a national and provincial agreement that doesn't take cognizance of the fact that there's actually a real ANC and EFF government in Johannesburg that needs to be dealt with. And the fact that these parties have the ability to attract a majority through the PA was brought to the DA. They committed themselves to talks. And after a week of avoiding those talks, letters were received where they said they won't support the motion, they won't talk with the PA, and they're going to amend it to try and dissolve the council, all of which was placed in the public domain a few minutes later. It's all very strange, and we're all trying to work out what to make of that.
But why would things happen in this sequence, in this order of things? By that I mean, you made the announcement before you'd locked in, basically, all the necessary support. You say there were conversations with the DA when you were discussing the National Pact for 2024. They said, okay, good, we'll meet. Yet the meeting, am I right to say, never actually happened, but they then told you why they could not support the motion to remove Gwamanda and tried to amend it. It all sounds as though you didn't really have your ducks in a row.
No, I think we did. I think it's important to remember that this motion of no confidence was filed in May. And through a number of delaying tactics, the Speaker of Council has cancelled council meetings and moved programming committees and done everything in her power to ensure that this thing doesn't sit. So there's been a very long-term conversation going on, even one that predates the multi-party charter for South Africa.
But then what does that mean for your relationship with the DA? Because how do you work together at national level when you've been unable, especially in the last year or so, to get any sensible agreement on your positions in areas such as Johannesburg and Tshwane, for instance?
Well, I think a number of parties, and not just ActionSA, is going to have to bring that back to the table. We have reaffirmed our commitment to the multi-party charter for South Africa. We don't join these agreements for the DA, we join these agreements for the South African people. And that means we must be willing to work with the DA. And sometimes working with a political party means you've got to call them out. And you've got to call them out when they are doing things that are counter to the commitment we have made the South African people. It's quite important to note, Tembagile, that being a coalition partner is not to be an mbongi or a cheerleader of the DA. Is to make sure that we can work together to serve our agenda. And when that agenda...
But can you work together, really?
I think we can. Without any doubt, there have been many instances where the differences have been put aside and progress has been made. But certainly, if you look at this particular example, we've got 6 million residents of Johannesburg that are living under an ANC and EFF government. They're being led by a mayor that has no discernible constituency and no vision for a city with complex challenges. And just to pretend that that's not the case is not acceptable. We have to do something about it.
But the Patriotic Alliance issue is not a new one with the DA. I mean, we had Gayton McKenzie on the show a few months ago. He was saying, well, he was surprised that they were basically being called criminals by some people in the DA who said they wouldn't work with Gayton McKenzie or Kenny Gunene because they were previously convicts, they've had associations or situations where they've worked along with the ANC, for example, and they simply do not trust them. I wonder why you think it would be different this time when even with the National Pact, when the issue of the PA came up, there were voices of resistance within the DA to any mention of their name.
Sure. And I think you must discern between voices of resistance and saying we're not going to do anything. The reality is that multi-party charter for South Africa has been a national commitment and a provincial commitment to the people of Gauteng to provide an alternative to ANC governance. Here you have the biggest metro in South Africa and in Gauteng, led by the ANC and EFF, and we have the ability to do something about it. Absolutely, the multi-party charter had to be seen as the shot in the arm that was going to get all of these political parties to work together, put the differences aside, and specifically, those parties agreed that when parties approached us, we would deal with them objectively, and we would not hold the past baggage against them. And yet it appears that's exactly what has happened here with the DA.
But it's a recurring issue. So what about next year? What are the implications for the National Pact? Will it basically, does it potentially risk collapsing because of what's happening with local government?
I don't think so. I think we need to be big enough and tough enough to deal with setbacks. We need to be open about it as well. These are issues that affect millions of South Africans, and we can't treat it behind closed doors like it's a country club. But at the end of the day, this is not something that's going to cause this arrangement to break up. We have to learn from it, and it's going to require a bunch of political parties sitting down with the DA and saying, this is not good enough. It is not good enough to make a national commitment to the South African people and to all be signing agreements and making these great statements. But when
why
the
does
first
it
test
appear,
comes
Michael,
our way...
that the rest of you are constantly having to negotiate, bargain, try to convince the DA, especially when you've all said that regardless of size, you want to be treated as equals in these arrangements, be it local government coalitions or the pact itself?
Well, I mean, certainly, I think we do want to be treated as equals, and elections will measure us, and elections will determine proportionality that then follows. And I think that could wait to an election. But certainly, in order to get to that point, what you've got to have is a group of political parties that have mutual respect for one another.
Do you respect one another, all of you?
I think we do. I think we all recognize that every political party has got to bring something to the table.
Even when they ignore you?
Well, certainly, it makes it more difficult. But the point there is, what do we do in those scenarios? Do we give up and walk away? Or do we sit down at the table and actually deal with it in a decisive and strong manner to ensure it doesn't happen again? I think that's a better approach.
So what now for Johannesburg?
Well, I think we're going to regroup. I think we regard this to be a tactical retreat. We need to use the time with our coalition partners to sit down with the DA and see if we can get them to see the light, get them to see the fact that you can't put a credible claim into Gauteng in 2024 if you're not willing to do it in Joburg right now. And we need to get them to see the bigger picture.
But the reality is, for you at the moment, you cannot get this done without the DA. Now, if they don't budge on their position on the Patriotic Alliance, you may very well have to sit it out, wait this out, until they want to remove Gwamanda or until the next election.
Certainly, and that's one possibility. But the one thing I wouldn't want to be, if I was in the DA's shoes, is explaining that position to the people of Johannesburg and the people of Gauteng in the 2024 elections. When you had the ability to address the situation, every day you complain about how that government is not delivering, and yet you haven't taken the power into your own hands and done what you should have done about it.
The DA now wants to, and they've put this to you in writing, they want to basically bring forward a move to dissolve all of council. Can that work? Would you support it?
No, it's a stunt. And I think what's quite important to point out and to demonstrate how hollow that stunt really rings is that the DA in their letter makes it clear they will not work with the PA to achieve the simple majority required for a motion of no confidence to succeed. The motion they are talking about requires a two-thirds majority to dissolve a council. If they're not willing to do what's required for 51%, how plausible is it that they'll get to 66?
Sounds though that the two of you are stuck basically in a very unhappy marriage, but you basically have to make it work because the other options just are too grim to even consider. Is that what's going on here, where you are stuck, basically?
No, I certainly don't think so. ActionSA is an independent political party. We are autonomous in our decision-making. Every day, ActionSA is growing in places where the DA could never dream of being growing. And we will continue with that particular objective. Has the relationship been easy? Absolutely not. Will it be easy going forward? Probably not. But will we give up because of that? No.
You say it's not been easy. Has it not been impossible? Because it appears to have been largely impossible on the big issues. I mean, there's always this back and forth between the two of you whenever there's a major thing to get done.
There has certainly been a number of examples like that, but I think what becomes important, Tembagile, is let's deal with the issues, because when we talk about backwards and forth and blame apportioning, it all sounds kind of petty. But what we're talking about here is the political direction of a city of 6 million people. These are serious issues. We are public institutions. We must account to the 6 million people of Johannesburg. And if the DA is going to take decisions that ensure that the ANC and EFF continue to govern, they must own those decisions. And as a partner of the DA's, we're not going to say our association requires us to be their praise singers. That's not what we're going to do.
Is there a way in which you could work out the numbers that you need, basically, let's say in the case that you want to bring a motion of no confidence against the Joburg mayor, where you wouldn't need the PA? Is that possible?
It's hypothetically possible, but it's highly unlikely. The group of parties that we have been working with before has 130 votes, and the PA holds 9. You need 136 for a majority. It is hypothetically possible that a bunch of one-seat parties can be brought in to make up the rest, but they are so fractious in nature and so unpredictable in their voting patterns that I don't think there's any possibility of presenting any stability arising from such an arrangement.
And what did the PA say when you told them that the DA had once again said, thanks, no thanks, nothing to do with the PA?
Well, I wish we had had the opportunity to even engage them directly and convey that. Unfortunately, the answer we received was received by members of the media shortly afterwards. So I suppose the PA read the answer in the media, and that was the manner in which that issue was dealt with.
And the DA, have you written back to them to register your, shall I say, contempt for the decision?
Absolutely. We've communicated that it's just fundamentally dishonest to try and say that we won't do this, we won't do that, you know, we won't provide the leadership required for Joburg, but we got this idea of dissolving the council, which everyone knows cannot work. In fact, even the DA's letter goes on to talk about what happens when it doesn't work, which is an admission that it can't possibly work. From our point of view, you know, we put that on record, we've communicated it, but, you know, there's not a willingness to sit down and engage. When Herman shared that letter, he said, thank you for your letter, here's my response, but you can't govern and deal with coalitions through letter exchanges. Let's sit down and talk.
There's a letter going around now, excuse me, saying that Mpho, the former mayor of Johannesburg, by the way, has now resigned as a councillor. She says at the end she's not leaving the DA, just leaving council because she's now also caught up in her work as a medical doctor, etc., and it's simply too much to juggle at once. Do you buy that as the reason for her resignation?
Look, I don't have any personal knowledge to refute it, but I would find the timing remarkable that on Saturday the DA communicates that they're not willing to support a motion of no confidence and to retake Johannesburg. And on the Monday, there's a resignation citing reasons that have been in place for over a year now. It does seem strange.
And where does she stand? Because am I right to say in the last round of talks in Johannesburg, she was more willing to reach over and speak to the PA, but it was, shall we say, the superiors in the party who were not keen at all on that level, on that kind of engagement. Was that her position this time around? Do you know?
I haven't engaged her this time around. Certainly in the previous time around, what I can say is that had Mpho been in charge of the negotiations for the DA, the coalition government would never have left office.
And is her departure from council then going to be a loss, do you think, for the city of Johannesburg?
Certainly, I think so. But I think it's an ongoing pattern of good and capable people who aren't finding comfort in that particular place. And that's something that they must deal with. It's not particularly for ActionSA to be concerned about.
Will you send her membership papers?
I don't think so. Like any South African, she's free to join ActionSA.
Well, some say they've been lobbied. Would you?
No. I think, to be very honest with you, we are past the stage of having to engage in import leadership. We grow our own leadership. We're a growing party. We've got a lot of capable people who are operating, and they don't need anyone else to be brought over them.
Michael Beaumont, let's watch what happens in the end. Thank you very much for coming in. Michael, speaking to us about the situation in Johannesburg. ActionSA has withdrawn its motion of no confidence against Mayor Kabelo Gwamanda because the numbers simply did not add up. The DA is still refusing to be part of any move, if you will, in that direction if it involves the Patriotic Alliance. As I was saying a short time ago, the former Johannesburg Mayor, Dr. Mpho, has now resigned as a councillor in the city of Johannesburg. She will, however, remain a member of the DA. She says she will instead focus on her career as a healthcare professional. She's thanked the DA for putting its confidence in her and for supporting her during her time in office. Her last day in council will be at the end of September.